The drop pod punched through Zhar 9's upper atmosphere like a meteor, its exterior plating igniting as it cut through the thick layer of storm-racked clouds. Inside, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Stryker remained motionless, his breathing controlled, his pulse steady. Outside the reinforced viewport, the world below unfolded in chaotic fury. Rivers of molten rocks slashed across the landscape, jagged mountain ridges cast long, broken shadows, and the sky churned with an unnatural red haze. War had turned this place into a graveyard long before he arrived. His heads-up display fed him real-time data. The CRAN had entrenched themselves across the largest landmass. Their war camps were fortified with energy barriers, watchtowers, and automated gun emplacements. Heat signatures swarmed like angry embers, thousands of bodies moving in organized formations, vehicles rumbling across the terrain, massive siege beasts pacing within their containment fields. The pod's internal alarms flared as enemy anti-air defenses locked onto him. Plasma fire streaked from the ground, bursts of green and violet energy lancing upward in a desperate attempt to intercept. The moment of impact would decide everything. He tightened his grip on the restraints. The pod slammed into the ground with a seismic impact, sending up a shockwave of dust and debris. The reinforced hull absorbed the brunt of the force, but Stryker wasted no time. Before the hissing hydraulics had even finished venting the pod seals, he was already moving, his combat rifle raised, eyes scanning the terrain through the thermal overlay. A CRAN patrol was already closing in, a mix of bipedal warriors in jagged exoskeletal armor and their quadrupedal war beasts, lean, sinewy creatures bred for close-quarter slaughter. They hesitated for only a second, as if unable to believe that anything had survived the impact. And then they charged. Stryker fired a 3-round burst, the rifle suppressor reducing the sound to a sharp hiss. The first warrior's head snapped back, its carapace rupturing in a fine mist. He pivoted smoothly, dropping 2 more before the others even had time to react. The war beasts howled, their handlers releasing them in unison. Stryker sidestepped the first, slamming his combat blade up into its exposed throat before twisting and using its collapsing body as a shield against the second. He fired twice, the rounds punching through the beast's skull. The last CRAN, realizing the mistake of underestimating him, turned to flee. Stryker shot him in the back without hesitation. He exhaled slowly, scanning the battlefield. The real hunt would begin soon. The enemy now knew he was here. Retrieving what little he could from the fallen, he slipped into the shadows, his mind already shifting to the next objective. He needed intel, weapons, and above all, the element of surprise. The night belonged to him. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Cosmic Conquerors channel. Before we start, I hope you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so that you receive all the new content, and also share the story with your friends so it reaches as many people as possible. And if you have a story, write it in the comments. Maybe we'll choose one to narrate in the next video. Let's start the story. Pay attention, because there's a small detail that might change your entire perspective and awareness of life. Hours passed as he moved through the war-torn landscape, a ghost among ruins, stealthier than a ninja cat on a moonless night. He avoided open ground, using the environment to his advantage. Shattered rock formations, dried riverbeds, the remains of ancient structures swallowed by time. Every encounter was swift, brutal, precise. He neutralized isolated patrols, left false trails, and mapped the enemy's movements with ruthless efficiency. What do you think? Was he having fun or just super focused? His instincts told him when he was being watched. The CRAN had begun deploying reconnaissance drones, their glowing red optics sweeping the terrain like angry little fireflies. He destroyed them methodically, never allowing their signals to return to base, cause, no receipts. But the enemy was adapting, pulling their forces inward, fortifying key locations. They knew he was out there, lurking in the shadows, and now they were hunting him. Stryker, being the cool cucumber he was, actually welcomed the challenge. He infiltrated an abandoned observation post high in the cliffs, the vantage point giving him a clear view of the largest enemy encampment. It was like a giant, angry ant farm, but with more plasma cannons. He set up his scope, calibrating the magnification, and began to pick apart the layers of defenses. The camp sprawled across the valley floor, surrounded by shielded barricades and reinforced bunkers. CRAN officers moved in tight formations, directing lesser soldiers, while towering mechs patrolled the perimeter like overprotective parents. But what interested him most was the command center at its core. There stood General Zorak, a beast of a warrior even by CRAN standards. 4 massive arms, each covered in overlapping layers of chitinous armor, moved with practiced lethality. He carried a plasma blade the size of a human torso, its surface crackling with unstable energy. This guy was the architect of the war on Zhar 9, basically the head honcho of all this organized mayhem. Stryker listened to the intercepted transmissions through his encrypted channel. Zorak was furious. He'd lost too many men to an unseen enemy, aka Stryker, the ultimate party pooper, and now he was calling for reinforcements. This was Stryker's opportunity, a chance to turn the tables and make things even more interesting. He marked the most vulnerable points in the encampment: the fuel reserves, the supply caches, the generator cores stabilizing the energy shields. He would turn their own war machine against them. Nightfall, the first wave of destruction. He set explosive charges along the northern perimeter, ensuring they would detonate in sequence, like a very explosive symphony. The first blast sent fire and shrapnel high into the sky, a spectacular, fiery welcome. The second ripped through the munitions depot, the shockwave igniting a chain reaction that sent secondary explosions tearing through the compound. Panic spread like wildfire. CRAN warriors scrambled for cover, shouting in their guttural language, unable to pinpoint the source of the attack. Stryker moved through the chaos like a phantom, taking advantage of the confusion to pick off officers and disable communication relays. Zorak himself emerged from the wreckage, his rage evident in every thunderous step. He barked orders, rallying his warriors, but Stryker was already one step ahead, a chess master in a very violent game. He lined up a shot, steadying the crosshairs over the general's exposed neck. He squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck true, but the armor was denser than expected. Zorak staggered, but he did not fall. Instead, his head snapped toward Stryker's position, his 4 burning eyes locking onto the distant ridge. For the first time since he arrived, Stryker had been seen. The general roared, and the entire camp turned in his direction. Stryker exhaled. The hunt was about to change. The valley erupted in chaos as the CRAN war camp mobilized. Ryan Stryker had expected a response, but even he hadn't anticipated the speed of their counterattack. Alarms howled through the wreckage, barked commands crackled over enemy comms, and spotlights swept across the ridgeline, searching for the phantom that had brought destruction to their doorstep. He had taken his shot at General Zorak, and while the alien warlord hadn't fallen, the message had been delivered loud and clear: "You've got a problem, buddy." He was no longer the hunter. He was now the hunted. And honestly, he seemed to dig it. He slipped back from his vantage point, his silhouette vanishing into the jagged terrain below. CRAN strike teams fanned out, scanning the hills with thermal optics. He counted at least 3 squads moving toward his last known position, each accompanied by a mechanized war beast. The first mistake they made was assuming he would still be there. Rookie mistake: aliens. What do you think? Was he just toying with them at this point? Stryker adjusted his route, shifting down the opposite slope, keeping to the shadows where the enemy's optics would struggle to detect him. His breathing remained slow, controlled, despite the growing tension. The enemy had numbers, firepower, and home field advantage. He had precision, experience, and the knowledge that panic would spread through their ranks like a virus if he struck correctly. Think of it as psychological warfare, but with more explosions. The first squad was sloppy, moving too fast, too eager to find him. Like kids rushing to find candy. He timed his attack perfectly. A flashbang arced through the air, detonating in a pulse of white-hot light. Before the blinded warriors could react, he was among them, his combat knife a blur, quicker than a hiccup. The first throat split open before the alien even realized what had happened. A second fell as Stryker twisted the blade from one body into the next. By the time the last one recovered, his rifle was already raised, 3 rounds, clean and efficient. The war beast, however, was still alive. It lunged, serrated teeth snapping inches from his throat. Stryker rolled, planting his boot into the creature's chest and firing a single shot through its skull. It collapsed with a shudder, its massive frame kicking up dust as the light in its eyes flickered out. Another one bites the dust. Gunfire cracked through the night, stray plasma bolts cutting too close for comfort. The second squad had found him. He broke into a sprint, zigzagging through the uneven terrain, his mind already cycling through the best way to turn the fight in his favor. They had superior firepower, but they were reacting, not thinking. That gave him the edge, like having a cheat code in a video game. He led them toward a crumbling structure, what remained of an ancient fortification, long abandoned to time. The moment he entered, he rigged 2 proximity charges along the outer walls before slipping into the shadows. When the enemy followed, the explosives detonated in perfect sequence, shattering stone and flesh alike. He emerged from cover in the chaos, picking off survivors before they could recover. Then came the sound he didn't want to hear, a deep, resonating thump-thump-thump, heavy footfalls shaking the ground in rhythmic pulses. Oh, bigger toys were coming out. The CRAN had unleashed their war machines, bipedal armored walkers, each mounting twin-linked plasma cannons and an array of automated tracking turrets. They weren't going to waste more infantry, they were going to crush him. He exhaled, steadied his pulse, and analyzed the terrain. Open ground was death. Running was pointless. That left only one option, taking them down before they locked onto him. He sprinted toward higher ground, taking cover behind a massive stone outcrop. The walkers adjusted their trajectory, targeting scanners sweeping the battlefield. The moment one came into view, he fired a high-velocity, armor-piercing round. It lanced through the narrow gap between its plating, hitting the power conduit beneath. Sparks erupted, and the machine lurched, one of its legs giving out in a violent collapse. Before the others could react, he was already on the move, tossing an EMP grenade at the second walker. The pulse shut down its targeting systems long enough for him to plant an explosive charge on its hull. He detonated it mid-stride, the machine erupting in a fireball of twisted metal. He kept moving, every second counted. That was when he felt the impact. A shockwave sent him sprawling, the force of the explosion tearing at his armor. He hit the ground hard, his vision swimming. He had barely recovered when he heard the voice, deep, guttural, and angry, General Zorak. The CRAN warlord emerged from the smoke, standing atop the wreckage of one of the fallen walkers. His 4 arms flexed, muscles rippling beneath the carapace plating. The plasma blade in his grip burned with a sickly blue fire. "You are an annoyance," Zorak snarled, stepping forward, his heavy boots crunching over debris. "And you have cost me too much." Stryker got to his feet, his ribs screaming in protest. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, but he wiped it away without acknowledgement. He sized up the alien, reading his stance, his breathing, the shift of weight in his limbs. Zorak was strong, faster than his size suggested, the kind of warrior who had never known fear. "Good." Stryker unholstered his combat knife. The CRAN laughed. "You think you can stand against me alone?" Stryker gave a slight smirk. "I wasn't planning to fight fair." He pressed the detonator in his left hand. The charges he had set across the battlefield earlier erupted in synchronized devastation, collapsing entire sections of the valley floor. CRAN reinforcements that had been closing in were buried alive. Supply caches and weapons depots vanished in pillars of fire. Zorak barely had time to react before the very ground beneath him shifted, the force of the blast throwing him off balance. Stryker seized the moment, closing the distance in an instant. Their blades met in a flash of light and steel. Zorak was powerful, each strike like the swing of a warhammer. Stryker dodged narrowly, countering with precise slashes meant to cut tendons, pierce weak spots. But the alien was fast, faster than expected. He adapted quickly, adjusting his stance, learning Stryker's patterns. Then he landed a hit. The plasma blade seared across Stryker's side, burning through armor and biting into flesh. He gritted his teeth, using the momentum to roll away, breathing through the pain. He couldn't afford another hit like that. Zorak came again, relentless. Stryker baited him, backing toward one of the remaining explosive caches he had left untouched. Just a little closer. Just one step. The warlord launched. Stryker dove aside at the last second, rolling onto his back as he fired his last explosive round directly into the cache. The explosion was instantaneous, a shockwave hurling Zorak through the air. The alien crashed hard, his body broken, armor shattered. He struggled to rise, but his limbs failed him. Stryker approached, blood dripping from his wounds, his knife still in hand. He stood over the defeated warlord. "For the record," he said, leveling his sidearm at Zorak's head, "it was never going to be fair." A single gunshot echoed through the burning valley. Stryker exhaled, scanning the battlefield. The CRAN forces were in full retreat, their leader dead, their morale shattered. But as he reloaded, his comms crackled to life. A new voice, one he didn't recognize. "Well done, human," it said, slow and deliberate. "But the real war has yet to begin." Stryker's grip tightened. This wasn't over. "What do you think? Who was this mysterious voice, and what do they have in store for our hero?" The battlefield was silent in the aftermath of General Zorak's death, the flickering fires of the destroyed CRAN war camp casting long, jagged shadows across the broken valley. Ryan Stryker stood in the ruins, his breath measured, his body aching from the wounds he had endured. He had torn through the enemy's forces, crushed their leadership, and left the surviving CRAN fleeing into the night like a bunch of scared little kids. But even as he reloaded his rifle, reinforcing the familiar weight in his grip, he knew this wasn't over. The voice over his comms had been calm, deliberate, and chillingly confident. It hadn't belonged to a panicked officer or a desperate survivor. It had been something else, someone else. Then the ground trembled, a low mechanical groan rumbled through the valley, followed by the rhythmic pounding of something enormous. The air grew thick with static, dust swirling in unnatural patterns. The fires flickered, their glow momentarily swallowed by an overwhelming shadow stretching across the ruined landscape. Stryker turned toward the source, and then he saw it, the Titan. 50 feet of reinforced war plating, its skeletal frame wrapped in pulsating energy fields that shimmered against the night. Its head was a monstrous fusion of metal and living tissue, 4 glowing crimson eyes scanning the battlefield with cold, calculated precision. Twin plasma cannons, each large enough to obliterate entire buildings, shifted on mechanical limbs, locking onto him with inhuman patience. Its movements were deliberate, each step shaking the ground as it advanced. Stryker had faced war machines before. He had dismantled them with strategy, precision, and superior tactics. But this was different. This wasn't a machine meant to support an army. This was the army, and it was hunting him alone. His instinct screamed at him to move, and he did, just in time. The first plasma blast tore through the space he had occupied a fraction of a second before, turning the rock behind him into a molten crater. The heat seared against his armor as he rolled into cover, but there was no time to stop. Another blast followed, carving a trench through the valley floor. He sprinted through the wreckage, using the terrain as best as he could. The Titan was too big, its weapons too slow to track him at close range. But he had nothing capable of punching through its armor. Standard explosives wouldn't do it. Heavy rounds wouldn't do it. His mind raced: adapt, overcome, kill. What would you do if you were in his shoes, facing a monster like that? The Titan took another step, crushing a CRAN body beneath its weight like an afterthought. Then, with a metallic hiss, its chest panel shifted, revealing an array of micromissile launchers. The moment Stryker saw them, he moved. A deafening whump 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 filled the air as a dozen missiles streaked toward him, each one programmed to track heat signatures with relentless precision. He threw himself off the nearest ledge, crashing into a lower ravine as the warheads exploded above him. Rock and fire rained down, shrapnel cutting through his exposed armor plates. "Think fast!" His HUD flickered from the impact, but his eyes caught something crucial: the energy stabilizers on the Titan's back. A mech that size needed core stabilizers to prevent it from tipping over uneven terrain. If he could disable those, he could force it into a vulnerable position. It wasn't about destroying it, it was about bringing it down. His fingers moved instinctively, assembling his last remaining explosives into a directional charge. He set the timer for 10 seconds, just enough for one shot at this beast. Another explosion erupted behind him, the Titan still hunting. He sprinted, zigzagging across the battlefield, his breath even despite the exertion. The ground shuddered as the machine adjusted, trying to track his movement, its cannons firing in controlled bursts. Then he saw his opening. The Titan stepped forward, exposing the glowing energy stabilizer at the base of its back. Stryker launched himself forward, running directly toward the monstrous machine. The targeting systems adjusted, shifting for a clean kill shot, but he was already airborne, using a fallen war mech as a springboard. In that split second, as gravity slowed, he flung the explosive pack with perfect accuracy, securing it directly onto the stabilizer unit. Then he landed hard, rolling into a sprint before the Titan could retaliate. He pressed the detonator. The explosion ruptured the stabilizer core, sending a chain reaction of energy feedback through the machine's exoskeleton. The Titan lurched, one of its massive legs locking mid-step, its weight shifting uncontrollably. The energy fields flickered, circuits overloaded. The once unstoppable behemoth tipped forward, crashing into the valley floor with earth-shaking finality. Stryker didn't wait. He climbed the wreck, scaling the machine's mangled plating, knowing that he had one shot left to finish this. The Titan's main core was still active, pulsing with raw power beneath layers of fractured armor. With his last charge, he ripped open the plating and shoved the explosive directly inside. The Titan's 4 glowing eyes flickered, as if recognizing too late what was happening. Stryker jumped. The explosion ripped through the Titan from the inside, shattering metal, circuits, and organic components in a burst of fire and destruction. The shockwave sent him tumbling across the ground, his vision swimming from the force of the blast. Then, silence. The Titan's massive frame collapsed, smoke rising from the ruin of what had once been an unstoppable weapon of war. Stryker lay still for a moment, his chest rising and falling as he fought to regulate his breathing. His body screamed in protest, his wounds pulsing with pain, but he was alive, and the Titan was not. The battlefield was his. His comms crackled again, this time from Earth Command. "Stryker, we've been monitoring." "Holy hell!" He cut them off. "Mission complete." His voice was calm, steady, final. Then another voice, a different voice. "You have their attention now, human." Stryker's gaze shifted toward the horizon. Something else was coming. He exhaled slowly. "Good," he muttered. "Let them send more." And with that, we have reached the end of the story, but stories don't end here. If you like the story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel so you receive all the new content. And if you have an opinion or something that caught your attention, leave a comment and let's discuss together. I'm waiting for your opinions, and see you in the next story. Bye.